Hi, we want to welcome you to Family Recovery Matters. We are so excited. This is our first episode. We're the Dixon family. We own an addiction recovery treatment center, and we've wanted to do this for a really long time. We have probably over 15 years of being on the front line, working with people with their addictions and their family members, where we're here to share what's working. We know that family addiction, or that addiction, is a family illness. It affects everyone in the family. And what we have noticed and what the research shows and indicates is that when a family member becomes knowledgeable about what's happening with their addicted loved one and the principles and the practices, that it increases the likelihood of their loved one finding treatment, staying in treatment, maintaining long-term sobriety by almost 80%. It's huge. And we are witnesses of that. And we are so excited to bring you some hope. And we know that many of you that are joining with us today are, you're right where we were many years ago. You're in a lot of pain. And you're trying to figure out, what can I do to help my loved one? And we're here to help you learn what to do when you don't know what to do. And I am so excited that I have my husband and my two sons. We all work with the Renaissance Ranch, and we all kind of play a part. But I'm so excited that on every episode, we are going to blend the voices of the person with the addiction and the family member from that codependent perspective and the addicted perspective. We want that 50-50 every episode. So it's going to give you a lot of resources. We're going to share with you, everything that we share with you will be free. We have family classes that are free every week. We have 4 classes a week. We have just a lot of great resources that we're excited, so pumped to share with you today. And I want to introduce you to my husband, my better half. This is Rick. And about 15 years ago, these two boys here were struggling a lot. And we
I don't know if you call it heroin addiction. Struggling.
That's right. Let me introduce. This is Tyson and this is Preston. They're our 2 oldest of 5 children. And we were in a lot of fear. And I remember thinking, who is going to love them the most, more than their mother? This must be my responsibility. This must be my job. So I remember just going crazy, racking my brains, trying to do everything possible to be worthy for God to show me how to fix them. And everything I tried wasn't working. So I want you to introduce Rick. He's going to talk a little bit about what's going to happen today in this podcast and what's going to happen in future podcasts.
Thank you, honey. And yeah, we are excited. We are just excited to be able to share with you kind of our story, both from our loving addicts perspective and as parents, what happened, how we got through this. So what we want to do is have each one of us share a couple things. One, what happened? How did this addiction grab hold of our life? What happened? What were some of the consequences? And then what was the recovery like? How did that work? And so you see the hope. 15 years ago or so, our family was really in despair, really struggling. We had no idea as parents what to do. Our 2 boys, our loving boys, our oldest boys were struggling. So we really felt short as far as understanding and knowledge. So hopefully with our experience, the darkest abyss can be our greatest light to you to share, so you see what's possible, so you can see the hope of recovery. We really believe that the 12 steps are the power that helped us in our recovery. Christy and I have been working in recovery for over 15 years. We've went to hundreds of meetings. We've been group leaders for years with our church. We've served out in the prisons for over 10 years. Again, hundreds of 12-step meetings. And what we've learned is that there's great hope, even with those who have struggled with addiction for 10, 20, 30 years. There's great hope in receiving some recovery. So we want to just go ahead and share our stories of struggle and then of hope. And each and every podcast will first next time will be step 1, and then step 2, and on, so you can see how recovery has worked in our family's lives and in the guests we bring on. So with that,
and if I could, honey, just really quickly, I wanted to say with this podcast, we really want to hit the bullseye of how to recover, and that's with the 12 steps. Back in the 1930s, there were 2 men, Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob, who started a program called Alcoholics Anonymous. And I know many of you have heard of it. I didn't know a lot about it. But they came up with these amazing 12 steps, which are so spiritual in nature. They have been able to heal millions of people. And if you look back, we have a wonderful track record now over the last 90 years where we can say, what was working, what wasn't working. Well, the addicts were finding hope and peace and growth, and they were finding long-term sobriety. But what was happening with the family members? They were still kind of stuck. They were stuck in their resentments. They were stuck in fear. And fear. They were, for so many years, they had a purpose in helping their addicted loved one get better. And all of a sudden, what's my purpose? And their relationship, had to be reframed. So we have discovered that the family members working the same 12 steps helps heal that relationship. The number one cause of that cycle of addiction and relapse is relationship conflict. So that's why we're here to bring this message to you, that the number one thing that we can do to have an influence on our loved one is work on that relationship. So both of us working on this together, you guys, is going to heal that relationship. And really it's the best thing that we can do, that we learned, was to work on our own recovery. So we're super excited. We're going to turn the time over to our sons, because it's critical that in every episode we're understanding each other. We need to understand, what are our kids going through, or what is my spouse going through? And we need to learn about the disease of addiction. We need to learn about shame. So the boys are going to cover that. They're going to talk about where they came from and where they are today because of those 12 steps and because of recovery.
So when we start, Preston, with you, can you share your story?
Sure. So I remember just sitting here thinking, back in 2006, Tyson and I here, for the previous few years, just out of high school, we got involved in drugs and alcohol pretty hard. It started off fun, as kind of an escape from, kind of a controlling environment. Dad was more so of the, you got to be here at 9 o'clock. You got to do kind of the, almost a military dad. And Mom was more of the codependent, enabling, or whatever you need, honey, what can I do to help you? Or, it's just that dynamic was interesting growing up. My personal story, I didn't make out the high school soccer team. I had a lot of feelings growing up for some reason of not being good enough. Like I didn't measure up, and always wanted to fit in. And then the first time I drank or used pills, it seemed to numb that out, and I seemed to feel good enough. I seemed to be at peace, and I couldn't figure out why doesn't everybody use this stuff? This stuff's amazing. I feel free. I feel more relaxed, and so I started to experiment with more and more different chemicals and drugs, and slowly but surely, I started to have to use more drugs just to feel that way, and then I had to use those same amount of drugs or alcohol just to feel normal. And then I remember many times waking up just trying to figure out why I feel so crappy, and so. Along the way as well, I would justify and rationalize my behaviors, and I just kind of dug myself in this pretty deep hole where I just didn't really know how to get out. I was severely addicted to heroin in 2006, and I had a few friends pass away, and it started getting very real. Didn't like who I'd become, didn't like the guy looking back in the mirror. And I wanted to change. And so I had the desire to really do something. I just didn't know what to do. I was scared of being sober. I didn't know how to do that thing. I didn't know how to do recovery. And so March 16th of 2006, after detoxing in the hospital, I checked into treatment. And I started seeing guys who had genuine happiness. They seemed to be having fun, and that's something that I hadn't had in a long time. The fun for me was getting high and playing video games, or just not really doing anything of real purpose or value. And seeing guys who were actually genuinely happy and laughing was kind of the beginning part of my recovery, as far as having that desire to want to do that again, just to be able to laugh and feel joy and peace without having it being manipulated. So then, after I got out of treatment, I had this amazing, experience where I learned how to do life. I learned how to connect with others. I learned how to have a relationship with God and to my own understanding. And I learned that I didn't have to be perfect. Growing up, I think one of the sources of my shame was feeling that I had to do everything perfect to be good enough. I had to be perfect to be worthy of God's love. I had to be perfect to have a girlfriend, or I just all these really, really high expectations. And I learned that it was false. And that doing recovery, I didn't have to do it perfectly. I just had to show up. It's an action game. I had to put action in, and slowly but surely, I started seeing and feeling the results of that. I started liking the guy looking back in the mirror. I started trusting that guy. I started having meaningful relationships with people around me. I learned how to get vulnerable and talk about how I was feeling. Before treatment, I didn't know how to do that. And so that for me was a huge piece of recovery, is being able to just get down to the roots and identify what emotions I'm having, and be able to express those, and not feeling like I had to carry them around like rocks in a backpack to the point where it just was pulling me down. And just learning how to be okay with me and who I am. And I'm still working on that. It's something that's a continual process, and that's one thing I love about recovery is it's kind of like a big game of whack-a-mole. Once you start working on maybe your ego or pride, and you start getting that in place, all of a sudden this other mole pops up, and you got to pop that, and it's just this fun game. But overall, I wouldn't change anything about my recovery and how I've done it, because I failed a lot, but I've learned so much from those failures. And our relationships with my families, we've had our struggles, but we've come together, and over the last since 2006, where we've come as a family, I'm a grateful addict. And I don't really now I don't look at myself really as an addict in a sense a lot of people see, or their perceptions see it. It's more so just having that understanding that I know if I use again, that my brain's going to go crazy on me, and I'm going to be craving that again, and it's just not worth it. My life's so much better today.
Press, what I love about what you said is that you're learning how to feel. This is truly a feelings disease. Mm-hmm. And I look at where you were years ago. You've got now, 10 plus years of sobriety. I look at your life now. It's a miracle. I look at your wonderful wife, your 2 kids, the love at home, but yet the disaster you had years ago. And it's just amazing what recovery has done. It's truly been a miracle.
Yeah, and it kind of reminded me, as you were sharing your story, when I first started, Rick and I first started going to 12-step meetings before the boys did, because I had heard there was a program in our church, and I had heard that the only advice I ever got was, go to a meeting so you and your husband can come together on the same page, which was really helpful, because I had actually was having, my kids don't know this, but I was having thoughts of separating or divorcing from my husband at that point in time. So when you were sharing your story, it reminded me of when we started going to the meetings and hearing the people with addiction in the room, like hearing their hearts and their feelings, and how hard it was to stop. And when you just expressing that you felt so less than, and using made you actually feel like, you actually were somebody, and expressing that, it just softens our hearts as family members. And if I could ask you, what are the 2 things, Preston, would you say that that recovery and working those 12 steps has done for you? The most important things in your life, those 2 things, what would you say?
I'd say the number 1 thing is having a relationship with myself, and be able to love myself, respect myself, not be so hard on myself. Just having just valuing myself. As weird as that sounds.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. That
know,
self-identity is everything.
You know, because I mean, there was a time where if I made a mistake or I messed up or I did something wrong, I would get into this place of anxiety and depression, and it was hard to pull out of because I was so hard on myself, you know, and it's almost like you just get the efforts, you know, and then I'm just going to do this, and then you do tension relieving things and not real, you know, like self-helping things, if that makes sense. Goal achieving, but more so,
What would you say the second greatest gift of recovery has been for you?
Probably just the connection with family, and you know, today I have a wonderful wife. I've got 2 kids.
So cute.
We have so much fun. Just being able to wake up and have time and be present. That's one huge gift in recovery that I've learned is to be present when I'm with my family. Because it's easy when you come home sometimes, I mean, to just want to check out and watch TV or whatever my new addiction is, working out or whatever. You know, we all have these vices, right? I still do, but it's being able to take a moment and see what really matters and being present with the kids, playing with them, being present with my wife. If she wants to vent, let her vent. And I've learned not to try to fix her problems, you know.
Wow.
There we go.
Okay.
Because that doesn't work out.
Big applause here for all men. Yes. We don't need to fix their problems. We just want, us women, we just want to be heard. We just want to be validated and hugged. And we just want that emotional connection. So we don't need to be fixed, men. So I'm glad you said that, Preston. Thank you so much. Really fun before we move on to Tyson's story. Thank you so much. That, as a mom, is so good for me to hear that again and be reminded. There was a documentary done on Preston, his life and our family, and I think you go to YouTube and it's like 12 steps to change.
Just you Google step 2 LDS 12-step.
Well, I think if you just put, I checked 12 steps to change
Google,
a video series, and it's step 2. And Preston, this is where he found God. Like, he didn't really have God in his life too much until that point, and it's beautiful.
It's powerful.
It's powerful.
The most powerful media I think that has ever been done on our family or any of our
story
experiences.
was that.
I mean, it's 2 minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes long.
So Ty, share with us your story. You know, what happened? What happened with the starting of your addiction? Maybe some consequences, and then the hope that followed, and how you got into recovery and why.
How honest should I be?
Very.
Yeah, they need to learn. They need to learn from our mistakes. That's what's nice about having people that's been through
because you know what? We know a lot of you out there are hurting. A lot of you have members of your family. It might be a son, a daughter. It might be a husband or a wife, and you're hurting. And you're wondering, what can I do? And so we validate that. And we just want to be real here. And there is a reason. The emotional dishonesty and what was happening in our family, there's a reason why we had addiction in our family. And so through these episodes, you'll see more and more of that. But Ty, go ahead.
Well, I mean, and it's no surprise, Mom, that you felt you like it wasn't going to work with Dad at that time, because the relationship between us was so toxic, and so much anger and so much passive aggressiveness, right? And we would try to avoid each other at all costs, but when we did overlap, it was on, you know. And we were getting just about the same size as Dad, and even from way younger, it was like you know, we just had some weird personality trait that we wanted to do everything that we were not supposed to. I think that some of that is personality, I think, and then some of that is influenced by the environment. And in our environment was a shame-based family system, and it's a lot of I think the things that are difficult to really describe and highlight issues that people have with organized religion. Because of a lot of the good things and positive things that are involved with religion. However, there can be imperfect people that will unconsciously shame themselves and shame others for not living up or measuring up and making more mistakes.
Yeah.
Fear of making mistakes, fear of things not going on. I mean, fear is the big driver, but between a lot of that.
Yeah. So share your personal story, Ty. Like,
Well, yeah,
where did it start?
I think it's good also for the viewers to see like where we're at now. We've talked that we're in long-term recovery. My experience is very similar to Preston's. Everything he said, I experienced, kind of went through, and he was a massive catalyst for me, kind of paving the way. So me seeing that it was safe to move that direction and okay to move that direction of experience and recovery, and I'm forever grateful for that. But I think so today, I'm also a clinical professional. I have advanced substance use disorder counselor, as well as a degree in psychology. Have also been engaged in many different 12-step fellowships, but also engaged in the clinical professional side of it. And that's what's awesome, I think, about Renaissance Ranch and what I experienced compared to working and being a patient at many other places, was that there's also a very heavy dose of the newest clinical advances in treatment and therapy. There's very, very specific psychotherapy and motivational interviewing tactics and approaches that are being done in conjunction with really out-of-the-box, authentic, spiritual, engaging solutions to help family members and to help guys like us, which is just it's unreal to be a part of it. And I think that it's important that viewers understand, right, that we're also not just coming from a person in recovery and our family in recovery experience, but some people with real hands-on, in the trenches experience. And what we're also going to have, I'm excited to see in this podcast, is a lot of the other professionals that will come on, in their experience and how it intertwines with what we've experienced. But and I think even just to move a little bit back from there, you say what's, if you look at conflict, relationship conflict, it for me, the way I see it, it's a breakdown of communication, an inability to communicate. And the family members working a program of recovery or working the 12 steps in conjunction with the addicts getting treatment and working a program, it helps to create a bridge. A lot of family members think that, hey, let's just put him in there, fix him, and then book him and send him back. He should be good because he's really most of the problem, which a lot of that is true. Our behavior is insane. However, when the family members really engage and get some awareness and some understanding, a bridge starts to get built almost and linked.
Absolutely.
To where then there actually starts to be some flow of communication so that both parties can start healing and progressing. And our practical experience shows it's a massive difference maker when both sides of that coin make genuine and sincere progress. So really that's the heart and soul of I think why we're here, why our family went through this experience, to share and show that is possible. But it is not over for us. It's something that we still work on a very daily basis to maintain what we've been given. But in regards to being involved in a shame-based family system, it's hard. It's always been hard for me to really describe and depict what that feeling, what that is and what that looks like. For me, it manifested in a lot of anxiety and tension, and that's really what I kind of knew and understood. And as an adolescent, I didn't have the skills to really even label that that's what I was feeling or that's what I was experiencing. That's just how I was feeling. And so when I found things that relieved that, it's kind of something that lets a little bit of pressure out of the bag, let us steam out, right? Which first it was, just being accepted in the popular group, and doing what I was being what was being communicated to me as cool was objectifying women, and using drugs and alcohol. That was that was very, and that was different, very different than what we had learned at home and what we had learned in church and what we had been taught, the kind of what happiness kind of brought and stuff. And so when you kind of find yourself in this polarizing situation, and when I started to experiment with different things, I went to a place of deep sense of shame when I was at home and when I was there, and it's almost like I had to create a different personality and facade to be around you guys and or anyone related to church or anything like that, and a completely different person in my peer group and with Press. And the reason we got so far without you guys knowing anything is because we looked out for each other and we kept it secret and everything like that. But I just remember feeling an overwhelming sense of anxiety and pain, because we're stupid kids. We'd sneak out and get caught, or get caught by the police, with alcohol or marijuana, and we came home and I just remember being just terrified. To have to go in your master bedroom and sit down and get talked at, and how could you do this to me and our family, and being a father now, it's just, man, my heart hurts, because it's like I get it, I'm starting to get it, but because what do you do in that? I mean, a completely defiant kid, and it was just a lose-lose kind of situation.
Yeah, and I was thinking, Ty, as you were saying that, how perspective shift, and when we were going through that, 19, 20-year-old kids, the perspective that we were only seeing was our own.
Right.
We were using these drugs and alcohol, and we were looking at those as a solution.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've really learned in recovery is that the drugs and the alcohol, they were never the problem. Mm-hmm. They were a problem, but the real problem was these underlying causes and conditions, the reasons why we felt we had to use, but more so, the reason why we felt we had to continue to use.
The inability to cope with uncomfortable emotion, and the inability to place it and to work through it, and sort it appropriately. So with you paving the path, Press, I remember getting a letter from my brother when I was in jail, one of the 10 times I got to visit our fine Salt Lake County Metro Jail. Grateful for law enforcement. I really am grateful that my insanity got locked up, because I could very well be dead. But I got a letter from you, and I didn't recognize what I was reading. It was like, hey, bro, hey, I'm having a lot of fun, and I'm not on drugs, and I'm discovering, who I am. I'm discovering a higher power, greater, and it's actually very different than what we've been taught. And I don't remember what you said, but I remember what I felt like. Okay, that feels right. Something clicked. That makes some sense. It was the first time I ever felt any kind of hope that things could be different, because I was so put in a vice grip of addiction and what was happening in my brain, which I understand now is developing the disease of addiction, and I didn't know that that's what was actually going on in my brain until it was there, and I was essentially, my ability to make decisions was taken off the table, and my brain had been chemically altered, and so my midbrain, the amygdala, was calling the shots and making the decisions for me, and it's a place of complete utter selfishness, and and so that's what drove me to jail and insanity. But feeling that hope was fascinating, but still thinking I could do it on my own, and going back out. But at that time, you guys started getting help, going to meeting with other professionals, and so even though I was drinking and using, you were responding to me very differently. I remember you were responding to me not with this. I didn't feel like this condemnation and shame. It was different. It was, okay, I'm being treated as an adult. Maybe I should start acting like an adult, right? Kind of thing. And so I got to go to an amazing treatment program. It's not around anymore. The same program Press went to, and I had a lot of massive change. I was 19. I completely changed all my goals and what I wanted to do with my life, and it had so many positive experiences there that that I feel changed my very personality, my very perspective. You put it beautifully, Press. Changed. One of the biggest gifts is how I've looked at myself, and how I look at others. Addiction is a complete self-centered, engulfing perspective, and real happiness and recovery has been turning that outwards to others. And how can I influence others' lives for good? How can I add to my family's life? How can I one of our deepest needs is to be loved. I wanted a happy, meaningful relationship more than anything, but not realizing that in order to have that, I need to give that, and kind of starting to figure out life and how things work, and how people live happy, normal, successful lives, because I had been doing the complete opposite. Right, so treatment was really good to shine a light on all the insanity and all the unmanageability and the powerlessness that came from that way of living, and then I'm ready for solution, and I was ready to make progress. And even though I made massive progress, I was sober for a year and a half, and I slowly stepped away from a program of recovery and action and relapsed. When I was 20, and then was relapsed, and then went back into the ranch, not back in, but that's when we were all introduced to Renaissance Ranch in September of 2008, and was able to then reestablish what I had gained in my recovery, and then have it taken to a whole other level with a massive support group of the band of brothers that we have today, that has been instrumental and continues to be instrumental in my sobriety and my recovery today. And we have a lot of fun, and we live life, and we help each other through this thing.
It's interesting, Ty, how when we were kids, we talked about, growing up, we're always each other's best friends. I remember talking about how when we grow up, we're going to live in the same neighborhood, and our kids are going to be friends. And the coolest gift of recovery that I've seen, is that literal dream has become true. Mm-hmm. We live right around the corner from each other. Our kids play together all the time. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's what recovery looks like. That's the hope piece that I look at you, man, and see how much you love your kids, and the relationship you have with your wife is just so genuine and honest. And that's when I think of recovery, that's the kind of thing I think of. The relationships of family, because that's what's most important.
What was the framework you used, Tyson, to find all of this strength and to find yourself and to move through your recovery? What was the framework? How did those 12 steps, how did that fit into your life?
Well, I think working the first step for the first time, I really did with, it's always said that the first step is the only step that we have to work perfectly.
Maybe you can tell them what the first step is for the new people listening.
The first step is we admitted we were powerless over drugs or alcohol, and that our lives had become unmanageable. We admitted that. And a lot of us think we admit it, of course, but we don't really fully concede to our innermost selves that we are completely incapable, 100% incapable of overcoming this illness on our own. We might let go 80% of it, 90% of it, but there's still
something holding on to
a couple grips on it, of a percent. And so, and everybody that I see that relapses after they have recovery, it's because they've always had a grip or two, a thread or two, hanging on to maybe that they can do it. In my experience, going to the ranch, I had a complete, just that shattered, that just complete chop down through my step one experience that we do with the group and the professionals, where it's really driven into me, and my awareness was heightened. That's really the value of any treatment, provides awareness for individuals. And
Was it a spiritual thing for you too?
well,
as well?
for then it was not yet, right? It was
Ego crack.
it was a complete ego dismantlement, which was critical for a personality shift, because when that crack happened, then some spirituality could get in. I had to completely admit that I can't do this thing, and then it's like, okay, well, now what? Who can? What can?
Right.
And then it's like, this God stuff has got to be real, or I'm screwed. I'm uttered, like, I'm going to die.
Because you don't see everything. They do the step one after a few weeks where you get to know all these guys around you, and they start to see your character weaknesses and these defects and your defense mechanisms. And so you're sitting there,
They call
step
you
one,
out.
and you've got all these guys
Takes an addict to
calling
heal
you
an
out.
addict. Yeah,
Well, it's because we don't have an
absolutely.
X-ray. Look, if we had brain cancer, we can go in. The doc can put us through an EKG and say, "Look, here's a tumor."
Good
For
point.
a guy who's an addict, I mean, we think we're pretty much normal. Yeah, we got a few problems we got to deal with. But when you're
It's
sitting in a
not
room
bad.
and you've got 12
Right.
guys saying, "Hey, man, you've got this, that, the other," and at the end they go around and they all call out all the defense mechanisms. The denial or the apathy or the justification or the minimalization. Or,
Right.
I mean, there's a
And that
20-page
needs to
list
come
of them.
from the other addicts, not the family members.
Oh, we
for
don't
sure.
listen to family.
That's a
So-
good point.
So Ty, get back to the
Yes.
spiritual part of it, because you said at first there was not the spiritual part. Because that's what we see with people with addiction and the family programs. The family members, we all have so much fear because, we've raised our children in this spiritual environment and now they're going this other way. And then that causes us to be given all this unsolicited advice and all this preaching. And the more we do this, then the more they run away. And so maybe talk a little bit about, to calm us family members down, talk a little bit about how those 12 steps help.
And I might mention that
Yeah.
that when what we've seen is a person when they're in their addiction, they tend to push God out of their life or justify that He's
Or
not
be
in existence.
hiding, the
Ty,
shame.
you might
the shame.
remember this when
Yeah.
you were in your late teens, 18-ish or something like that. You says, "Dad, look, I know you believe in God. I know you believe in the scriptures. I don't. You need to respect me and I'll respect you. Deal?" You remember that talk?
Yep.
And that's a lot of times where an individual is when they're struggling with this addiction. And so,
Yeah, and I remember in
So
that,
how did
in
recovery
that
bring
moment,
that spiritual back to you?
yeah,
Your
I remember
spiritual-
in that moment, and it'll tie in with your point, Mom, is, Dad, you didn't say a lot. You were kind of confused. You were genuinely confused and bewildered. But this was like, it was a big thing for me, working up the courage to say, I'm not going to do that stuff. I'm not going to lie to you or the bishop anymore. Like, all that, this is too much shame and crap to carry. I'm
done.
out.
Yeah.
And you're like, you said, okay, one day you're going to have to know. One day you're going to have to know. And that day came, that day that I really took that first step in my heart. That day came because I was utterly alone, and without knowledge or power to fix my issues, my problems. And so the second step was, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And so once you're at that place of hopelessness, it's kind of like a process of kind of coming down to right size into reality, but then opening up the door to rainbows, butterflies, sunshine, right? Like I guess to explain it, because it was like, the process then, treatment became for me, or my recovery process became a quest to come to believe if there was a power greater than myself that could restore me to sanity. And and it's a process for everyone. And the cool thing about it is it even works if we're just willing to even believe that we can be restored to, or willing to believe that something greater than ourselves. And so I started following like this suggestions in the directions. I remember, you know, because I'm kind of visual, I have to do things visually to understand them a lot of times, or even make stuff up in my mind. And I remember saying to the group, I'm like, so what you're all telling me is that everything that I think I know about life and in recovery, everything, because I know a lot of stuff. I know I'm a smart guy and all that. But you're telling me everything, I've got to throw it all out the window. And there was like a resounding, like, yes, you know, like when you have, you know, and when you have 12 people that have a different perspective than you,
right?
you throw your perspective out the window. You just do it because it's not serving you. And so it's like, you know, it's like my head had come out and I'm like, oh, okay. And I threw it out the window, and then I started just listening and absorbing what other people were saying, and for me it was then I started realizing what spirituality was, because I started feeling stuff that I can't describe. And it's, I guess, maybe it's what hope feels like, maybe it's what faith feels like, maybe it's what peace feels like. Hope that the future can be different than what I thought. I thought I was gonna eventually like be homeless and stuff, like, and I was kind of okay with that.
I remember Ty, when you're in early recovery, when you're starting to get it. I remember a conversation I had with you, like, dude, what's working for you, man? I remember you said I've been praying for a new perspective. That was pretty good.
Well, we're gonna take this a lot. Yeah, we're gonna take this a lot further as we get into these podcasts, as we do step 1, step 2, etc. But let's shift for a second, because what happens when there's a family struggling with addiction? The addict is really struggling. His or her life has become unmanageable. It becomes a train wreck. It's disastrous. There was many times, not a few, that our boys were in jail many times, and it's a tough thing for them. But what about the family member? What about the wife whose husband's an addict? What about the parents like us, whose sons or daughters are addicts? What we have found is, yes, there's a lot of pain and struggles with the addict, but there's a lot of pain, anguish, fear, resentments, just a lot. Your life becomes unmanageable as well as a family member. Mm-hmm. And so it's important, when Christy said a bit ago, it's just as important for the family member to engage in their recovery. It is not recovery from drugs and alcohol necessarily, but recovery from these resentments, the fears, the enabling, all the things that are causing the issue. So what I want to do for a minute, if we could, is let's switch and have Christy, why don't you share now your perspective, maybe how this has affected you, your struggles in the beginning, and then the recovery part. And just let it flow. Share with us your heart.
Yeah.
What happened.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I just want to tell Tyson really quickly that, wow, this is so special for me to hear. It's so special for me to hear my sons express their feelings, because I feel like men are kind of conditioned to not share their feelings. And I think that's so cool. I just got to ask one question before I maybe share. With Ty, can you just share maybe what was the greatest gift, 2 gifts really quickly, of recovery for you through working your steps, being willing to, learn from other addicts that were in recovery, go to meetings. What was the greatest gift today? What are the 2 greatest gifts for you?
The greatest gift is I started a lifetime relationship with who I come to understand and identify is Jesus Christ. This dude I'd heard about that I guess died in a horrible way for me or for mankind. I didn't understand it. but have a relationship with a power much greater than myself that could not just relieve me of the despair and the depression of anxiety, of despair of addiction, but that could provide me with an immense amount of hope and love and peace and ability and to do life and to be and to have a meaningful, successful life. And so that is the gift. It was a new heart, a new life, a new perspective, and then the blessings and the gifts that have come after that are too much for me to hold. Like I feel like a bowl of just overflowing goodness. Like it's kind of been like that since. That's been my experience. And it all stems from that love from a being that I still don't understand, but I understand enough to know and to feel the power of it, and to have experienced great change and the ability to keep that change in remission.
Well said.
I love that. And both of you are such amazing husbands and fathers. And I feel like my husband is probably, to me in my life, like the greatest miracle of recovery in our family as well. Recovery doesn't just affect the relationship you have with your addicted loved one, but the principles that we learn start to just flow into all relationships in our lives. And I feel like, with every family system, none of us are perfect. There's not one family that doesn't struggle. We all have those generational patterns, right, of positive behaviors and negative behaviors. And I see that because of recovery, because of you guys' willingness to work those steps, the way that you interact with your wives and your children is very positive. And I just know and gotta believe a lot of that's come from what you've learned in recovery through working hard those 12 steps. So I honor you, and I'm so privileged, to be your mom. And we recognize that many of you listening may have lost your loved ones to addiction. And we have, in our family meetings over the last 15 years, we've met several people, who have. And I will share with you that, in fact, we're going to have them on the show, and we're going to have them on the podcast in the future. We have so many resources of people in long-term recovery, but because they are willing to learn and grow emotionally, physically, mentally, through working those steps, those 12 steps, people who have lost loved ones talk about the peace that those actions have brought to them. And so we're just so grateful to have this platform, to have this technology to reach out to you all. I would like to share that, years ago, it started about 20 years ago when I first heard that Tide had a phone call from a parent talking about he'd been to a party in junior high. 80% of people, it's been said, get started with addiction experimentation in junior high, right? When we're like in such an awkward stage. But I got this phone call of, there was marijuana at this party, and that's the first time I started to recognize and see behaviors, with the boys of leaving the path that we, our hopes and dreams. And it kind of puts you as a family member in a place of grief, because all these dreams and all these expectations that you had, from your culture, from your religion, from your own personal dreams and hopes, kind of flies out the window for a minute. So anyway.
All right. So what's interesting here is that with a family, there's a lot of reasons why addiction happens. In ours, it was emotional dishonesty. It was shame. I was a shamer, and it was not okay to feel in our family. It wasn't okay to talk about feelings. It wasn't okay to feel feelings, to believe your feelings, or heaven forbid, discuss your feelings. And you just had to buck up. And when I saw issues with the boys, I would try to shame them into being better, which is the core center of addiction, shame. And we'll talk a lot more about that in the future. What I want to give us all hope, though, is that there is great hope in whatever situation you're in. Do you know these two boys, for years they struggled in addiction, many times in and out of jail, We had to actually ask them to leave our homes because we couldn't trust them at our home. I mean, it was not a good scenario. But you know what? Great things can happen. Great things can happen. And you see the results. In fact, right now, well, let me back up. Here in 2014, we had an opportunity to purchase the ranch. This is several years after Tyson had gone through. And now, together, Christy, I, Preston, and Tyson, we are the owners of the ranch. It's a miracle.
That's a miracle.
And right now, Tyson's the CEO of the ranch. Preston's the COO of the ranch. And Christy, she runs the whole ranch.
No.
No, she is just
I'm in school, so
passionate
we're just doing family,
about
family education.
about education.
Which,
But it's
thank you for bringing that up. I need to just.
but yeah, let me turn it over to her. We'll end this, but there's just great hope that can happen. So, hun, won't you wrap us up?
This has been awesome. We're going to have to do a round two. We are Dixons. We tend to talk forever and ever. Our son's going to have a hard time chopping this up. But really quickly, we have some resources for you. And every week we'll share these. But the number one thing, if you want to learn more, we offer free public education classes. We have 4 a week. So go to renaissanceranch.com. You can also go to Addiction Recovery Mom on Instagram, and I'll post some links for you so you can get involved in our classes. I know a lot of you don't have money, you can't afford treatment, and so we want to share as much as we can and encourage you to Google 12-step meetings in your area. Start going to 12-step meetings. Start going to Al-Anon, which is the family member program of AA. There's so many resources out there, and in the future we will share more of our experiences with you. We have learned from our mistakes, but also we've been able to observe hundreds and hundreds of individuals, both with addiction and family member side. We're still doing that. We've been doing that for 15 years, and then professionally with the ranch and family education classes the last 8. Appreciate Tyson's clinical perspective. We'll be having our lots of clinical people coming on as well. But again, this is going to be the addict perspective and the family member perspective. We need to understand each other.
Combined.
We need to save lives. We need to save relationships and families, and we all can start doing that with a little bit of information. Just sharing that information with the world will really, really help end this opioid crisis. So thank you so much.
So tune in with us in the future. Thank you.